is as old as time. So is the quest to find the killers. And when sleuthing meets science, new forensic tools are born. 1915, upstate New York. A farmhand stumbles across a horrific scene. 2 people shot to death. But when they find his gun, he quickly becomes the prime murder suspect.
And that meant finding someone to link the gun to the crime scene.
To solve the case, investigators turn to a brand new forensic field: ballistics.
What we would consider modern forensic science, the identification of firearms, simply didn't exist.
Can pioneers of this emerging science use the telltale marks on the bullets to uncover the truth? 87 years later, modern ballistics faces a life and death challenge when a sniper paralyzes the Washington, D.C. area.
There was panic. There was panic in the Washington metropolitan area.
Investigators' best chance to hunt down this brutal serial killer: the bullets taken from the victims.
It was something that we had to get our hands around right away. We needed that ballistic information to tie these cases together.
In the district on the southbound lane, it stretches of heavy traffic.
October 3rd, 2002. As Washington area commuters fight their daily dose of traffic on the D.C. Beltway, they've got no idea their everyday worries are about to take a back seat to a wave of terror. At 7:41 a.m., James Buchanan, a 39-year-old landscaper, mows the lawn outside a car dealership when suddenly he collapses. But the real surprise is he's been shot. An ambulance rushes Buchanan to a Montgomery County, Maryland hospital. But he dies from the single gunshot wound. For Detective Drew Tracy, James Buchanan's murder has special meaning. Buchanan's father was a fellow Montgomery County cop.
It hit home. It hit home for me and the people, the older officers and executive officers on this department who knew his dad.
But the question is, who killed him? There are no witnesses to the attack. No one saw Buchanan arguing with anyone. And there are no signs of an attempted robbery. 31 minutes later,
911, what's your emergency?
And just 4 miles away from where Buchanan was shot, taxi driver Prekumar Walekar is gunned down at a gas station.
The car was in the gas station at the gas pumps, and Mr. Walekar was pumping gas into the vehicle while he was shot with the one shot. At that point in time, the question is, where was the shooter, is what we were interested in.
He is killed instantly. Just like James Buchanan, he's taken down by a single shot from a high-powered rifle. Again, there are no suspects, no apparent motive, and no witnesses.
In that part of the day, the early morning, busy rush hour, there should have been someone, an eyewitness account of where that shooting occurred if the shooter or shooters were actually out in the open.
And the reign of terror is just beginning. Over the next 12 hours, the killer strikes 3 more times. 8:37 a.m., 34-year-old Sarah Ramos gets off a bus and is seated on a bench reading a book when she is shot and killed. 9:58 a.m., 25-year-old Lori Ann Lewis Rivera is killed at a gas station in Kensington, Maryland. Almost 12 hours later, at 9:15 p.m., a retired carpenter, Pascal Charlotte, is shot and killed in Washington, D.C. 5 murders in a single day. There's only one horrifying conclusion. A sniper is picking off victims at random.
We were dealing with something we've never seen before in this area, nor has most law enforcement ever seen a situation like this inside this country.
But the killer is just getting started. Over a period of 3 weeks, 5 more people are shot and killed. 3 others are wounded.
There was mayhem, there was terror. Families and their children could not do extracurricular activities, could not do shopping, could not go out. People feared for their lives. It was nonstop, and we had to reassure people. And that's where it was responsibility of the politicians to go out there and reassure people throughout the day. And it's hard to reassure people when several people are killed.
Investigators determined that none of the victims knew each other. They are only linked in death. Each killed by a single high-velocity shot.
One shot, one kill. And that's kind of a military statement, probably used in war by snipers, by some of the best snipers. So we were concerned that we were dealing with a threat that had either military training, advanced hunting training, or some type of a sniper-type background. And they were going for the one shot, one kill. But the interesting thing in a one shot, one kill is a lot of times people go for headshots because that's a conclusive shot, usually. And in these situations, we saw the majority of shots being center mass shots.
Depending on the caliber and the amount of powder used, a bullet from a high-velocity rifle can travel between 2,000 and 4,000 feet a second. At this speed, a rifle can hit targets from long range and inflict substantial damage. Now, detectives in the sniper case need to know if the same high-velocity rifle is responsible for all of the murders. And the bullets from victims are the only evidence investigators have.
We needed that ballistic information to tie these cases together. And we would need that later on, obviously, to tie the case in with physical evidence.
Every second is crucial in tracking down the killer or killers, and ballistics will be the key to solving this case. Forensic ballistics is the science of identifying and matching bullets and weapons used in crimes. It's one of the most important crime-solving tools in law enforcement. The science has been tested and proven in labs, and then used in courtrooms for decades. And the basic concepts used in 21st century ballistics are rooted in the 19th century. In the early 1800s, investigators attempted to track down murder weapons using bullets taken from the bodies. They used the shape and size of bullets to figure out details, like the caliber of the weapon they came from. This primitive use of ballistics was put to the test during the Civil War, when Confederate General Stonewall Jackson was killed in battle. The investigation into his death produced a surprising conclusion, that the fatal bullet came from a Confederate rifle. It turned out Jackson was killed by friendly fire. Alexander Lacassonier, a pioneer in blood spatter analysis, toxicology, and other forensic disciplines, becomes the first scientist to study the marks made on fired bullets. His paper, Deformation of Revolver Bullets, lays the groundwork for the science of ballistics. Unfortunately, there was still no reliable method of matching a specific gun to a specific bullet. But that was about to change. A breakthrough designed to make guns more accurate produced a surprising side effect, one that opened the door to tracing the origin of bullets. It was all thanks to a process called rifling. Gunmakers found that bullets traveling in a spiral could hit their targets more accurately, just like a football being thrown. To create that spiral effect in a weapon, they put grooves in the barrel so that the bullets rotated instead of shooting straight out. But it would be another few years before anyone realized that this rifling effect did more than just improve accuracy. Those grooves inside a gun now left a distinctive mark on each bullet, marks as unique as fingerprints. The year is 1915. Orleans County, New York, is a peaceful farming community near the southern shore of Lake Ontario. It's well before sunrise on March 22nd when German farmhand Charles Stilo rises to begin his daily chores.
Charles Stilo was a German immigrant. He worked basically as what they called an indentured farm laborer. He would sign on for a year with a farmer, do all his chores, all the work.
Suddenly, Stilo hears a scream. Glass breaking. And a gunshot.
As he stepped outside the front door, his foot knocked up against something. It's still pitch black, and he peered down, and it was a woman. She was the housekeeper for the Phelps farmhouse. Margaret Walcott, her name was.
Margaret Walcott is lying in a pool of blood, shot 3 times. And Walcott is not the only victim. Stilo heads for the main house where his boss, Charles Phelps, lives.
He went over to the house very cautiously, and he walked around the side. He saw the kitchen door was open. And as he got to the kitchen, he saw Charles Phelps lying on the floor, and his foot was propping the door open. And he had a quick look at Phelps, and he was still breathing, but he was unconscious, and he was breathing very, very poorly.
Phelps dies on the kitchen floor, right where Stilo found him. Local police come to investigate the scene.
When the investigators looked through Charles Phelps' house, they saw that his bedroom had been ransacked. He had a bureau at the foot of the bed, and all the drawers had been pulled out. And this is where his nephew, Melvin Jenkins, said Phelps always kept his money in the bureau, and that there was nothing there. They just thought it was a bungled robbery.
Investigators theorized that Phelps surprised the robber. A struggle ensued, and Phelps and Walcott ended up dead. But police find Stilo's account of finding the bodies jumbled and confusing. Soon, they start to wonder whether Stilo himself should be a suspect, and they bear down on him for answers.
He was grilled like a piece of beef, basically. They just went at him, hammering tongs. He was asked, point blank, do you own any weapons? He said, no, I don't.
Stilo is questioned for 2 solid days without food or sleep. And investigators continue to come at him with hard questions. Then, finally, he makes a stunning admission.
He admitted that he hadn't told the truth. And his biggest admission was that, yes, he did own a .22 caliber revolver.
Not only does Stilo own a gun, it's the exact same caliber as the bullet that killed his boss. But the cops want more than just a potential coincidence. They want a confession.
They kept him awake, kept him short of food. They really grilled him.
And finally, after hours of working on Stilo, police get what they're after.
Stilo then made a statement in which he admitted killing Charles Phelps and Margaret Walcott.
Charles Stilo is charged with double homicide and sent to jail to wait for his trial. Stilo's family tries to protect him by hiding the alleged murder weapon. But when police ultimately find the gun, they feel sure they've got the last piece of evidence in an airtight case. But just a week before his trial, Stilo claims he never made a confession and denies being the killer.
In order to build a really strong case against Stilo, the district attorney had to concentrate on the gun. And that meant finding someone to link the gun to the crime scene.
For the first time in history, the success or failure of a murder case will depend on the science of bullets. ballistic evidence.
Well, in 1915, what we would consider modern forensic science, that is, the identification of firearms, simply didn't exist.
That's about to change. Grooves added inside the barrels of guns make the aim of these weapons far more precise than before and produce a unique mark on each bullet they fire. But no one used those marks as evidence until a man named Albert Hamilton came along. Hamilton had written a popular book on forensics, and as an expert witness, he had a reputation for staying cool under pressure.
Albert Hamilton advertised himself as a forensic expert in several fields, including gunsmithing, handwriting identification, and toxicology.
Hamilton will use the latest in gunsmithing technology to help him match bullets to gun.
The essence of firearms identification involves matching a test bullet, a known bullet, with a crime scene bullet to see if they've been fired by the same gun.
Each gun manufacturer uses their own technique to hollow out the barrels of their guns, creating lands and grooves. Landmarks are the elevated ridges, and grooves are the cut-out spaces in between the lands. These lands and grooves force the bullet to come out in a tight spiral and keep it stable during flight. But they also leave tiny marks on each bullet that comes through the barrel. Those marks can easily help ballistics experts identify the model and caliber of the gun they came from. And if they look even closer, they can also find tiny microscopic imperfections within those lands and grooves. These rough edges leave marks known as striae or striations on every single bullet that leaves that gun.
And if the striations, or barrel rifling marks on each projectile, are identical, you've matched a crime scene bullet to the barrel of a specific gun, and in so doing, have identified the murder weapon.
But in 1915, nothing like that had ever been done before. Matching the bullets from the victim to the suspect's gun won't be easy. The markings on the bullets are extremely small, and the differences between weapons can be subtle. To make the comparison, Albert Hamilton will need something called microphotographs.
These were basically just extreme close-ups. He found what he called 9 distinctive scratches on the bullets.
According to Hamilton, the scratches from his test bullets match the scratches on the crime scene bullets. And that, claims Albert Hamilton, can only mean one thing.
Charles Steele's gun killed Charles Phelps and Margaret Walcott.
Hamilton insists he's proved Steele's gun was the murder weapon. The prosecutor uses this evidence at Steele's trial.
The introduction of Albert Hamilton into the case was quite problematic for the defense because there weren't any other experts they could use to counter his testimony. The fact that Steele did own a .22 caliber made that fairly easy for the prosecutor.
The jury weighs Hamilton's unchallenged ballistic evidence and begins to deliberate. The credibility of this new science and the life of Charles Steele hang in the balance. In the 87 years between the Steele case and the DC sniper investigation, forensic ballistics has become more refined and accurate. Powerful electron microscopes allow investigators to study bullets more precisely. But in October 2002, that's little consolation for detectives still hunting the elusive DC sniper. Over the course of 3 weeks, the sniper has claimed 10 lives and wreaked havoc in the DC metro area.
There was panic. There was panic in the Washington metropolitan area. We had individuals who were shopping, who were killed. We had individuals who were pumping gas, who were killed. People feared for their lives. I mean, it was nonstop.
A tip line set up to field calls from the public is overwhelmed. Many callers claim they saw a white van leaving the scene of several shootings. Police begin pulling over white vans all over the DC metro area. but it leads nowhere. Investigators have no eyewitnesses and no suspects. All they have so far are the bullets taken from the victims. And those bullets will first have to answer a key question. Are investigators hunting a single killer or a team of killers working together? At the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Lab in Rockville, Maryland,
Fire in the hole!
Chief Firearms Examiner Walter Dandridge sets out to answer that question. He'll use the bullets taken from the victims during the autopsy.
There was probably 4 or 5 bullets, but there were a number of fragments, that fragmented from these bullets.
When Albert Hamilton was making comparisons on the Stilo case, he had one advantage. The bullets in the victims' bodies remained more or less intact and easier to collect and study. But today, bullets from some high-powered rifles are specially designed to break apart in the body. Upon impact, the bullets fragment, and each fragment creates its own wound track, inflicting more damage on the victim. And making forensic ballistics more challenging. A team of pathologists, led by Richard Fowler, was charged with finding every bit of ballistics evidence during the autopsies.
The challenges specifically with these high-velocity bullet wounds are that the bullets are very fragmented. We call it a lead snowstorm, and literally that's what it looks like. You end up with, imagine snowflakes just dropping you, multiple little pieces all over the place, so it looks like snow.
The more fragments pathologists find, the clearer picture the ballistics experts will have of the bullets and weapons used by the DC sniper. Once the pathologists collect all the bullet fragments, Dandridge can get to work.
What we were trying to learn from this evidence was the caliber and the kind of firearm that may have fired the projectiles that were received.
Dandridge has a tool that Albert Hamilton did not. It's called the comparison microscope. The comparison microscope represents a major advance because it allows scientists to compare 2 different bullets side by side.
The comparison microscope is really 2 microscopes coupled together by a single eyepiece. You can see 2 objects at the same time, one on each stage.
Dandridge looks for the land and groove markings on the bullets and the smaller striae. He compares the bullets from each shooting.
I saw that the microscopic markings from one bullet to the next, the stria was lining up. And so I was fairly confident that these were fired from the same firearm.
Police now know that one weapon and probably one sniper was involved in all the shootings.
The ballistic link was critical because it obviously was telling us that it was one weapon involved in these shootings, which led me to believe that it was one person taking these shots or possibly more than one using the same weapon.
Police have another key piece of information. They've also identified the sniper's weapon, a Bushmaster rifle. Now they just have to take it out of his hands for good. By October 9th, the sniper has shot 2 more people. A woman in Spotsylvania, Virginia is severely wounded in a mall parking lot. And in Bowie, Maryland, a young boy is shot near his school. They both survive. But with every shooting, the search for the sniper is more urgent than ever. Then, 17 days after the first attacks, there is yet another deadly shooting. A 37-year-old man is shot and critically wounded while leaving a Ponderosa steakhouse in Ashland, Virginia. But there is something different about this crime scene. This time, the sniper leaves behind more than just another victim. He leaves investigators one of their best leads yet. In the Washington, D.C. area, investigators are on the hunt for a sniper who's already claimed 10 lives. But police investigating the latest shooting in Ashland, Virginia, have found evidence in the woods near the scene that could break this case wide open. There's a shell casing from a Bushmaster rifle, the same weapon they believe the sniper uses. There's also a note that appears to be from the sniper himself. Investigators study the note from every angle. It demands police wire $10 million to a credit card account, and it warns that your children are not safe anywhere at any time. The killer also makes cryptic references to conversations he had with a priest about a robbery and a shooting at a liquor store in Montgomery, Alabama. Detective Drew Tracy latches on to the strange references about the liquor store shooting and calls police in Montgomery, Alabama.
I started asking questions. I said, "Can you tell me about the shooting?" And he said, "Yeah, we had a robbery. One individual was killed and one individual was severely wounded." Also, when I asked him what type caliber weapon was used, he said it was a handgun, 22 caliber handgun. So I'm thinking 22 caliber handgun is not consistent with what we have. What is this all about?
It seems like a dead end. It's the wrong caliber and not a gun capable of doing damage from long range. But why would the sniper mention this? Tracy digs deeper and finds out the suspect in the Alabama shooting was interrupted by a passing police officer and started to run. But he dropped something along the way.
I said, "Well, do you have any forensic evidence?" And he says, "We do have a catalog, a magazine with some possible fingerprint information on it." So I said, "Well, what type of magazine?" And then when he said the one word, it just hit me. He said it was an Armalite magazine.
Armalite, a catalog that sells assault rifles. The same type of weapon that ballistic tests have proved the sniper is using.
So when I heard that, I became positive and thought we may have something there.
Alabama police send the magazine to the FBI lab, but they know it's a long shot. They still have no idea if the liquor store killings are linked to the DC sniper cases. Lab techs get a print off the magazine, but to their surprise, it doesn't belong to a former military sniper or someone with a lengthy criminal record. The print was left by a 17-year-old illegal immigrant named Lee Boyd Malvo. His prints are on file from a 2001 run-in with police on a domestic dispute. Using the fingerprint, investigators track Malvo to Washington State, thousands of miles away from the murderous rampage in Washington, D.C. None of it is adding up, but detectives follow the evidence trail anyway. They're on the next plane west to Washington State. Ballistics gave D.C. sniper investigators their first clues. But in 1915, ballistics science is in its infancy. Its first big test is the Charles Stilo case. Stilo, a farmhand, is accused of killing his boss, Charles Phelps, and Phelps's housekeeper. Using test-fired bullets and the bullets from the crime scene, expert witness Albert Hamilton claims he's matched Stilo's gun to the crime.
The jury had heard Hamilton indisputably link Stilo's gun to the murder bullets.
And after 6 hours, the jury returns.
And they found Charles Stilo guilty of the murder of Phelps and Walcott. He was at that point sentenced to death in the electric chair at Sing Sing.
That could have been the end for Stilo, but it's not. He still maintains his innocence. And besides, this is the first time bullets have been used to convict a man in a crime. What if the evidence wasn't as ironclad as the jury thought? His lawyers ask for a new trial and a fresh look at the ballistics.
All the while, of course, the clock was ticking. Stilo had a date with the death with the electric chair.
And on the very day he was slated to die, the governor orders a stay of execution and a review of Hamilton's scientific technique. Hamilton claimed to be an expert in gun making, among other forensic fields. But the governor assigned special investigator Charles Waite, and Waite enlists the help of two New York City detectives, Willingham Jones and Harold Butts.
Both of whom were very, very experienced with firearms identification. And he asked them to conduct some tests on the Stilo pistol.
They decide to replicate the tests Hamilton claims he did before the trial. They want to see if they get the 9 distinctive scratches Hamilton said he found on the bullets fired from Stilo's gun. The detectives set up their own test to compare bullets fired from Stilo's gun to the bullets from the murder victims. This was well before the age of water tanks and modern ballistics labs. So the detectives fire Stilo's gun into a bale of cotton and then retrieve the bullets.
They looked at the test bullet and they thought, doesn't look anything like the murder bullet.
Jones and Butts don't know what to make of this inconsistency. They wonder if cleaning the gun will produce a different result, and that's when they get a big surprise. They pull out so much debris from the barrel that they realize the gun hasn't been cleaned in years.
Which meant that it hadn't been fired. So they thought to themselves, Hamilton never carried out any test firings with this gun at all.
Suddenly, the entire case is in serious doubt. Did Albert Hamilton manufacture test results to convict an innocent man? There's only one way to know for sure: using the same science that Hamilton supposedly used against Stilo. The bullets used in the crime don't seem to match the ones from Stilo's gun, but everyone wants to be 100% sure.
For a more scientific analysis, Charles Waite asked a man named Max Posner to examine the evidence, the fatal bullets and the gun.
Poser will give everything a closer look, using high-powered lenses to photograph them. He sees something that Hamilton totally ignored.
When he examined the fatal bullets, each bullet contained a mark, or a tool mark, that suggested that the weapon that fired that bullet had a deformity in the barrel riflings.
But when he examined Stilo's gun, there is no such deformity. The rifling inside Stilo's gun has its own distinctive markings, but they're very different.
And since Charlie Stilo's revolver didn't have a barrel that would have made that mark, he was able to eliminate it as the gun that had been used in the murder.
Hamilton's so-called evidence was a lie. But the rifling inside Stilo's gun has left its own distinctive mark, proving while each set of bullets does have a clear-cut signature, in this case, they simply don't match. It's a huge step forward for ballistics, proving that a gun's signature marks can be enough to declare a man guilty, or in this case, innocent.
What Jones and Butts found ripped the heart out of Hamilton's testimony at the trial. He hadn't test-fired the gun. He'd just shown up at court with some photographs of any old bullets. Hamilton had just lied, he perjured himself. It just floated right by the jury, because nobody knew that much about firearms identification at this time.
Hamilton managed to peddle his expert advice a while longer, although he finally sunk his career when he offered to testify for both the prosecution and the defense in the same trial, whoever would pay him more. But Hamilton's ability to work as long as he did was a sign of how rudimentary police work still was.
In 1915, criminal investigation was not an art, nor was it a science. It was very unsophisticated. So if you have a murder case involving 22 caliber bullets and your suspect owns a 22 caliber revolver, that would pretty much do it alone. The Stilo case is a good example of drawing an incorrect conclusion based on insufficient facts.
The new ballistics test that proves Stilo's gun was not the murder weapon is enough to free Charles Stilo. Without the second look at the ballistics, an innocent man would have gone to the electric chair. And the Stilo case, even with all its flaws, turns out to be the launching pad for modern forensic ballistics. In 1925, 10 years after the Stilo case, Charles Waite, Calvin Goddard, Philip Gravel, and John Fisher helped create the Bureau of Forensic Ballistics, the world's first laboratory devoted solely to firearms identification. By the 1970s, ballistics experts are using powerful electron microscopes, allowing them to see and analyze the bullets in much greater detail. And in the 1980s, the FBI releases its General Rifling Characteristics File, a file containing the lands and grooves pattern of every type of manufactured gun, making it much easier for forensic scientists to identify where bullets came from. Each technological improvement means greater certainty in the courtroom. But detectives hunting the DC sniper are a long way from any courtroom. They have a fingerprint for possible suspect Lee Boyd Malvo, who they've now tracked down to Tacoma, Washington. But that's about all they have.
They found that Lee Boyd Malvo was living in the Lighthouse Mission with another individual, and that other individual was John Muhammad.
John Muhammad. The name rings a bell with investigators. It sends them back to the tip line they'd set up when the attack started. Someone calling himself Mr. Holmes had called with a warning about a man named John Muhammad.
And Mr. Holmes from the West Coast, from the state of Washington, called up and said he had an Army buddy named John Muhammad, who he just had a feeling may be involved and owned an assault rifle.
And not just any rifle. It's a Bushmaster assault rifle, one of the weapons the ballistics tests showed could have been used in the killing.
So we had a fingerprint, we had knowledge of John Muhammad, we had to find out more about John Muhammad, so we started checking every database and getting pictures and everything we could on John Muhammad.
And when they take a closer look at John Muhammad, they find he was well able to handle an assault rifle.
We found out he had military training, and we started putting the pieces together.
For weeks, police have been desperately searching for a white van, but it turns out that was a false lead. Muhammad drives a Chevy Caprice.
That gave us a vehicle. That gave us two individuals. And now we had to look at charges.
A federal arrest warrant has been issued for John Allen Muhammad. He should be considered armed and dangerous. He may be in the company of a juvenile.
Police have to close in on Muhammad and Malvo before they kill anyone else. Police release the make and model of the car John Muhammad is driving. And just hours later, they get a tip that leads them to a Maryland highway rest stop. Police spot the Caprice, swarm the rest stop, and take down their two suspects, John Muhammad and Lee Boyd Malvo. Police soon discover that this isn't just a getaway car, it's an integral part of the crime spree. There's a hinged rear seat for easy access to the trunk, and a hole cut out just above the license plate so that Muhammad could fire at his targets. With the snipers hidden in their car, and the difficulty of pinpointing the sound of distant gunshots, the DC snipers had come up with what seemed to be the perfect crime. But all it took was a handful of clues, the bullets left behind in the victims and a fingerprint on a magazine, to unmask these killers. And now, one final piece of evidence may be their undoing. Under the seat of Muhammad's car, police find what could be the murder weapon, a .223 Bushmaster assault rifle.
We had these two individuals under arrest, but then ATF still had to do the ballistics on that weapon to link it to the 11 other bullets.
With Malvo and Muhammad behind bars, ballistics experts take over.
The investigators brought me the Bushmaster and we decided that we needed to test fire that firearm to get samples to compare against the evidence that came in for the previous 3 weeks.
If they can prove the Bushmaster's bullets match those found in the victims, the case against Muhammad and Malvo will be airtight.
We test fired that firearm into the water tank, recovered the fired bullets.
Dandridge compares the lands, grooves, and striations on his test-fired bullets to marks on the bullets recovered from the victims. Meanwhile, Tracy and the other investigators wait.
I remember, kind of waiting, for that phone call. It seemed like it lasted forever, and then we received another phone call. The other phone call said, we got a tie-in between the weapon. We have a tie-in to those 11 cases.
The Bushmaster .223 rifle matches the bullets found in all the sniper shootings.
It was at that point that we knew we had the firearm. We had an identification. We identified the marks from the previous shootings to this firearm that we received. All I knew was that I had the gun. These bullets were fired from this gun.
The link between bullets is as strong as finding fingerprints of the killer right at the crime scene.
The results of forensic testing are that the weapon seized from the vehicle occupied by Muhammad has been forensically determined to be the murder weapon in the following shootings.
With the Bushmaster rifle linked to the D.C. area sniper shootings and Malvo and Muhammad off the streets, the D.C. metro area's nightmare is over.
There were people who were scared. There were children who were scared. For those 22 days, life changed. These individuals changed the lives of millions of people in this area. And that was part of what they wanted to do. They wanted to wreak havoc. They wanted to cause controversy. They hit in different areas because they wanted confrontation politically as well as with law enforcement in different locations. They wanted to thin law enforcement out so there wouldn't be a rush of law enforcement to one small area. That's why they moved around to different locations, several locations, to try to make us more thin.
The trials begin in October 2003, and ballistics evidence is a centerpiece of the prosecution's case against Malvo and Muhammad. Muhammad is convicted and sentenced to death. In November 2009, he is executed by lethal injection. Lee Boyd Malvo pleads guilty and is currently serving 6 life sentences in a Virginia prison. In the years since the D.C. sniper case, ballistic identification has become even more precise. IBIS, Integrated Ballistics Identification System, uses sophisticated electronic and optical technology to digitally store and compare images of bullets and cartridge casings found at crime scenes. IBIS's nationwide database gives investigators across the country access to ballistics evidence in almost every known crime involving a firearm, helping investigators share information and bring more criminals to justice. And now ballistics experts use 3D technology to create topographic models and take quantitative measurements of the bullet's surface area, allowing them to make even more precise comparisons. The newest in 21st century gun science has even produced weapons that use biometric sensors to check a person's grip and will only allow the gun's owner to pull the trigger. With each technological advance, the forensic science of ballistics becomes even more effective at catching criminals. And thanks to the pioneering investigators in the early 1900s and the continued innovations in ballistics science, there is no longer any doubt that the findings in the lab will mean justice in the courtroom.